This year, we welcome Jessica into the Canada's Most Powerful Women Top 100 Award Legacy as a winner in our professionals category. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Jessica Metcalfe to the stage.
Speak kindly, you're listening. It was the first day of dental school, and I was riding the elevator to the 13th floor. There were other first-year dental students surrounding me, and the energy in that elevator was vibrating. You would think that I would be just excited and over the moon because at the age of 14, I decided I was going to become a dentist. And now, 10 years later, at the age of 24, I was starting my first day. But as that elevator door came closer and closer to me, I noticed I was afraid, shaking, and thinking I was unworthy. Those doors opened, and I took my first step out into the hallway, and I slowly started to walk towards this room that just became so expansive. Wall to walls of windows, and beyond, the Boston skyline. As I continued to enter the room, more first-year students were there, upperclassmen to greet us, the professors, and the dean. It was buzzing. And yet for me, I just scurried to find a table. I wanted to blend in and hide. I wanted to stay small. I was afraid because I thought they made a mistake in picking me, and that they were going to get to my name on this attendance list, realize their mistake, and send me back home. I was shaking because, well, that's how my nervous energy shows up for me, along with butterflies in my stomach and sweat along my lower back. Take a moment and think about your nervous energy that you experience, maybe even when you come up to cross the stage today. Does your heart start to race? Do you get ants in your pants? Or maybe you're like me and you realize you can sweat in places you didn't even realize you knew you could sweat in. And as I continued to sit there, I felt unworthy because even though I decided at the age of 14 to become a dentist, it took me 5 years undergrad, the diagnosis of a learning disability, the start of a master's, to then apply close to 20 schools over the course of 2 years, to then be waitlisted at just one, and then be accepted at that same one. You can't do this. You're stupid. Who do you think you are? Have you ever thought about how you choose to speak to yourself? The words you use, the tone of voice, the pitch, or volume? Just as you use a different voice, whether you're speaking to a child, your best friend, your mom, or your lover, you use a different voice when you speak to yourself. And if you listened carefully, what would you hear? Would it be your inner gremlin? A voice that tears you down? Uses your faults and flaws against you? And reminds you of your mistakes time and time again? Or is it your inner champion? And today, we're going to call it your inner legend. A voice that brings you up, guides you through some of the darkest moments in life, acknowledges your wins and your successes, and all of the hard work that you have put in. At the age of 24, on that first day of dental school, likely before and definitely thereafter, all I could hear was my inner gremlin. And when I heard it, I confused it for thinking that it was motivating me. But it kept me small. It kept me caged, and it used my own words against me. What I didn't realize at the time is that the same area of the brain lights up and gets activated, whether you're having a conversation with someone out loud or you're speaking to yourself. It's the same voice you hear when you're reading in your head, practicing and rehearsing, going over those creative ideas, or even problem solving. Or maybe you've stood in the shower playing out an argument or scenario that may or may not happen. As I took a plane ride over here to today's event, I sat next to another high-achieving woman. She shared with me, is it the same voice you hear on Saturday going over your checklist, wondering whether or not you've done enough so you can take a break, so you don't feel guilty? I said, yeah, it's that same voice. It's why at times it may sound like a whisper, but feel like a scream. Fast forward to a couple of years of me practicing as a dentist. I started to pay attention to the voice that I heard when I spoke with my loved ones, with my cancer patients, with the students I taught, and with the organizations I worked with. That voice was kind, compassionate, and strong-willed. So I started to reflect, because if I had only been listening to my inner gremlin this entire time, I wouldn't have graduated dental school. So there was a voice that I needed to learn how to amplify or to create. So I started to unravel that strong-willed voice, and I started to take pieces from it so I could shape this new voice. Let me invite you into the dental clinic with me. As I walk into the exam room, Ben is 79 years young. He's slightly slouched in the chair, and out of the corner of my eye, I can see a cane. Ben has arthritis. He's wearing a white button-down, long-sleeve corduroy shirt and brown slacks. Ben is here seeing me today because he's been recently diagnosed with throat cancer, and I'm getting him prepared for radiation therapy. At first glance, Ben looks like a talkative person, and a lot of my patients tend to be, because I like to listen to where their stories start, because eventually they go into how they're processing this new cancer diagnosis. But this can be challenging in a hospital setting, because I would often find myself falling behind. Ben started to tell a story, and I redirected him back to the purpose of today's visit. I was already 25 minutes behind, and my dental assistant was breathing down my neck to catch me up, which I am very grateful for. So Ben's answer started to become more straightforward and direct as well. He understood why he was here. So he became wide-eyed, concerned, and trying to understand the information that I was describing to him. Now, at that time, Ben would slip in a little story piece here and there, and I tried to pick up on it. But I knew my time in that appointment would be short. So as I finished the exam, I started to get up and walk towards the door, because that is a cue for both my assistant and the patient that we're going to be wrapping up today's appointment. So I asked my final question, Ben, do you have any questions about anything we talked about today? He replied, do you think I'll still be able to give presentations even when I'm going through radiation? My shoulders melted, and my heart sank. I visibly couldn't share this with him, but I knew that this was going to be a challenge. And as I looked past Ben's shoulder, I could see my assistant glaring at me because she knew exactly what I was going to do. I grabbed the chair, I pulled it right back up next to Ben, and I sat down. And I said, Ben, tell me a little bit more about the presentation so we can figure out the timing on how and when the radiation will affect you. Ben started to describe to me about all of his endeavors going back to his early 30s. I still remember this conversation so vividly that I get chills down my spine. Ben described, I became CEO overnight at the age of 32. I didn't know what I was doing, and I don't think the board had any confidence in me either. But the guy before me did such a horrible job. I was so intrigued by Ben's story that I kindly asked him if I could pick his brain around his self-doubt that he experienced in this new role as CEO. He replied, of course. Ben, was there ever a time that you felt like you couldn't do the job? He replied, yes. Every morning, I woke up thinking that this was going to be the day that I would get fired. Ben, it sounds as if you felt like an imposter. Ben didn't know what imposter syndrome was, so at the end of the conversation, we had a little bit of time where I got to describe to him what it was. And I told him that it's not a true illness and that over the years it's changed from imposter phenomenon to imposter syndrome, and that words matter. And that at times we use it to describe how someone is feeling. And because of the way that they feel, they act and behave in a certain way. And I described to him that when we use it as a label, we give our inner gremlin ammunition to use against ourselves. How many times have you explained away your successes? Underestimated your abilities? Overworked to the point of exhaustion and perfection to prove your worth? How many times have you asked yourself, am I really good enough? Now, going back to Ben's answer, he replied, I felt like an imposter. I was only 32 and now CEO. I think I expected me to fail. I think they expected me to fail. Ben mentioned his concern for his age. It can be easy when we are doing something new, pushing ourselves outside of our comfort zone, or even staying inside of our comfort zone and doing something that means a lot to us or we attach an enormous amount of value to, where we can then tear ourselves down. But we know that age doesn't mean you can't do something, because today, accepting the awards for Canada's most powerful women, we have ages 16 to 72. Don't ever let your inner gremlin use age against you. Now, I still had a couple of questions for Ben, so I kept asking, what helped you break through the self-doubt? What kept you going? Ever so slowly, Ben straightened his shoulders as best he could. I kept showing up. I kept pushing myself. I kept fighting back the words I would hear myself say. And I kept reminding myself that I wanted to leave today better than I left it yesterday. That is the voice of an inner legend. Ben continued to gleam. Weeks, months, years later, the business grew. people were happy, and I was confident. Ben said, years. You know it takes years of dedication to own and operate a thriving business, to challenge the status quo, to make a difference in your communities, and to champion our country with courage and compassion. As I looked over my shoulder at the clock, I realized that I needed to wrap this up now because I was definitely going to be behind. My next patients wouldn't be too happy, but my dental assistant was pacing outside of the door at this point. So I asked my final question. Ben, confidence is a finicky thing. What would you tell the high achiever who can't believe in their capabilities just yet? Who can't hold on to that confidence yet? Ben grinned. This, our life, is a book. And this, now, is a chapter. And you get to turn that page whenever you want. But you have to write the next page different than what you wrote before. Ben and I were on the same page. Every word you use has purpose, meaning, and power. Every single word plays a role in how you view yourself, your identity, and your worth. Like a legend, you were forged in the fire of challenge and experience. And today you persist even when it isn't easy. You'll fail. It's too hard. This award isn't enough. You're not the leader or legend they think you are. If for whatever reason your inner gremlin decides to rear its head today, you can thank it and send it on its way, because there is no room for it here today. A few weeks ago, I was sitting in the car next to my best friend, Keely. She is my sister, the family I choose. And I turned to her and I said, so you know those imposter thoughts from the first day of dental school, which she was there for? And so times afterwards when I've had those moments that I've shared with you? She goes, yeah. I said, I'm kind of having them around the gala right now. She said, are you giving a speech? I said, no. She replied with, okay, some more positive reinforcing words. Not 4 days later was I then asked to give today's keynote. So I called Keely up and I said, so it's happening. She said, I knew it. There are women in our lives who are legends. They are our sisters, our mothers, our grandmothers, and our role models. You are sitting next to each other today as legends. Keely that day got to add to my inner legend voice. Jess, don't stress. You can write this in your sleep. You're nervous because it means so much to you. But remind yourself of all the times you've done it before. She was right. Once upon a time, I started to unravel that voice. Keely got to add a piece to that inner legend. And so today, let your inner legend take shape. Take in the sounds, take in the energy, take in my words. But if there is a spark of self-doubt that chooses to arise, find another woman in the room and let them know. So then they can add and shape your inner legend. Speak kindly. They're listening.